All right, we're good to go.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a Film Student's Guide to the Industry podcast. My name is Josh Dizon, and today we're going to be talking about Asian American filmmaking. We're here today with Filipino filmmaker Derek. Derek.
Hi.
Hello. Derek and I met a few weeks back through job training with Derek's cousin, who actually introduced us together and told me a little bit about what you do. But if you don't mind, Derek, tell the audience, what is it you do in the film industry currently?
Yeah. So, hi everyone. My name's Derek. I'm a filmmaker working and living out in Los Angeles. By day I work in digital media, and by night I write and direct short films, music videos, and stuff like that. I graduated film school 4 or 5 years ago now, and I've been out in LA ever since.
All right. And what film school did you go to? Actually, I don't think I.
Oh yeah, I went to Emerson College out in Boston.
Okay. And
Yeah.
you were Virginia born. I know you lived in Virginia for some time and grew up here a little bit.
Yeah, I've been a little all over. I was born in San Francisco, then I moved to Virginia, then I ended up in Colorado, then Boston for college, then Los Angeles because I don't like snow.
It all circled
Yeah.
back. You went back to Cali.
Circles
Mhm.
back.
Yep.
Can't escape California.
Yep.
So, me and Hector, we're both film students. And we were trying to, our best to get into the industry as a full-time job or, to gain more money from the industry, at least as a job right now, not just as a hobby. So I guess one of my questions being is that, how did you get your foot in the door of the industry? How did you get to where you are now?
Yeah. So I guess it was a long journey. Cause when I moved to LA, I didn't have a job, didn't have a lot of money, spent the first few months freelancing before, a friend of mine tagged me in a Facebook post for a job opening at the company I now work at, which I'd already applied for that job like 3 times. But because they tagged me in the post, the person that posted the job was like, oh, I guess this person has a rec from a rec, so we'll give him a shot, like at an interview. And since then, I've mostly been working just in digital media, whether it's like doing like equipment rentals and on-site production or doing more like studio management. That's kind of the sort of like the day job as it will be. Mostly because I kind of realized that, at least for me, it was really difficult to freelance because I hadn't specialized in any particular craft of filmmaking. I wasn't the best editor, the best cinematographer. Most of my skills were like writing, directing, which are great, but when you have if you don't have like a really great film or like a ton of money or like the right connections, it's very hard to, one, call yourself that, and b, kind of navigate the industry without a good portfolio. So basically, these last 4 years, I've used that time, what little time I have on the sort of weekends, kind of harkening back to like what film school was like, just making things every weekend, trying to like rebuild my portfolio and build something post grad, which has led to now this past year where I had a short film that I was able to tour through a bunch of Asian American Pacific Islander film festivals all over the country, which was really cool. And so that was kind of a big milestone that kind of took a really long time. I guess but by that point it had been 8 years since I had something in a festival and 4 years since college. So it had been a really long time. So it was a really long journey, but big part of it was just kind of step by step, putting in that little bit of work every inch of the way. So yeah, that's kind of how I got here.
Awesome, man. We always love hearing the story of how people got to where they are now from where they started and stuff. And it's really inspiring as students to hear that from you. So back to Asian American film festivals and stuff. There's actually been a rise of Asian American films out in more mainstream media and all that. I kind of wanted to just start off as what's one of your favorite Asian American movies out there, and could be from like whenever, whatever time or whatever type of person.
Oh man, I think a classic. Well, there's two that come to mind. There's the Sundance hit Better Luck Tomorrow, which is a Justin Lin film, the guy that does Fast and the Furious now. It has a bunch of then unknown actors like John Cho and Sung Kang, who are, and it's basically about a bunch of like Asian American delinquent teens that cause trouble. It that's like that's like still like one of the standards of like Asian American media from 20 years ago. And another film that came out around that time is called The Debut, which is a Filipino American film that stars Dante Bosco, and was one of
Oh,
his
wow.
first. It was the first film that he was cast in where he played a Filipino character. So that, yeah, and that film, I think it's turning 20 something this year. It was one of the first. It was like one of the first Filipino American films in theaters. Like it's one of those films where like when I came out to LA, I heard like legends of it, and the more I got to like meet people and know people in like the Asian American film community, it's like everyone had a story about it. So it's one of those more like cult following kind of indie films. Those are probably like my two like film festival-y ones. Otherwise, like, I mean, everyone dunks on Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, but I had a blast.
Oh, that movie's
um,
fun. I'm not
yeah,
even
it's
crazy
a
about
fun
Marvel,
movie.
and
It
I
was
really
it was
liked
one
it.
of those films, yeah.
Yeah, that bus fight, you can't, it's hard to top that bus fight.
That was a really good. That
Great.
was a really good bus fight. I thought the
Mhm.
choreography was really good. I was a
The
little.
music too. The music,
Music was pretty
very
good.
good with 88
Yeah.
Rising. Yeah.
Hmm.
It was definitely one of those films. Me personally, in my opinion, like I saw the trailer, and I was like thinking like, oh man, like they're just we have an Asian superhero, and then he's just doing martial arts. Like, come on. But after I saw, I was like, oh no, the Ten Rings, they give him power. I was like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense now. Although I know a few people with rings on their hands that don't have a lot of power, but
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard stereotype to beat. I mean, that character originally was created as like a Bruce Lee copy,
yeah,
and that's what makes it such a hard character to adapt. And I think like, they did a pretty good job at kind of omitting some of that or paying more homage than making it a one-to-one ripoff. So I think like that's a good thing. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I can't, it's funny because like there's so much martial arts in movies now. It's like not a surprise to me whenever I see martial arts in a movie. It's like, ah, cool, John Wick's doing martial arts now. Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
yeah.
Like
I think
it's
I
it's
think
a
it's yeah, no, I think it's one of those things too, where it's like as a martial artist, and my mom was also a martial artist too. Uh,
mhm.
I think it's like always stereotyped that oh, Asians, because it came from Asia, that only Asians can do it and only Asians can do it better. And really going into martial arts, I kind of found that actually no, a lot of people do it pretty well, and it's very based off like how well you want to do it. And like anything in life, it really is one of those like no, not only can these people do it, but everyone can do it, and they can do it very well if they just put their heart into it. They put whatever into it, kind of like filmmaking, where
Yeah.
anyone can do it if they just put their heart into it. If they really try hard, and if it's what they really want to do.
Yeah.
And
A
look,
show like Cobra Kai is a good example of that.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, it's very interesting, and I know as Asian Americans too. Like I've actually had some like family members say like, oh yeah, well, filmmaking is really hard, especially for people like us, and how like Filipinos or even people of color, it's very hard because you only see like really American, the stereotypical like only American rich white people can make monies, and there's all these other stereotypes that come with any other race in there.
yep.
But yeah,
Yeah. It's definitely, I would say that we live in a really good time right now. Like as in like this year, perhaps, you know, um hello.
hey Austin.
Hello,
um
yes, sorry.
You're
Continue.
good.
You're completely fine,
Apologize.
man.
all good. Welcome. um like this year in particular, you know, there was a rise in I guess like varying takes of representation in media. Not all were great, not all were not all were great, some were good, and they were all different. You know, they weren't the kind of same story repackaged over and over again. It wasn't like it wasn't like right after Crazy Rich Asians where they like had so many other shows that were basically like Crazy Rich Asians that came
Yeah,
out.
Yeah.
You
it
know what I
was
mean?
very weird.
Yeah, like I think about like Bling Empire came right after Crazy Rich Asians, and then there was another show that was very similar to it. So there's like a lot of that stuff, but now it's like, oh yeah, we have like um you know, like there's a variety of like different films. Like you've got Easter Sunday and you've got The Fabulous Filipino Brothers, two Filipino films, both with themes of family, but are two very different films.
Oh
And they
yeah.
can live separately, which is really nice.
I've been
It's
meaning
nice
to
that,
watch Easter Sunday. I heard it's very good.
yeah, it's there's one joke that had me laughing in the theater for 5 minutes straight. Um, so definitely look forward to you seeing that.
Definitely got put on my list that you gave me because I still have that list of
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah of Filipino things. Lumpia Man is definitely on my list because I saw a trailer for that one, so I was like, I got.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, I mean, back to movies. It's just you know, I definitely think that you know, uh, like there's times where it does work, and then times where it doesn't work. And one of the few times where it doesn't work, and one of the biggest ones that I've seen is actually, you know, Mulan and Raya Last of the Dragon. I think it was that one.
Yeah,
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
they've definitely tried to, you know, make films like, you know, bring back one film and make it live action, and they try to make it like, oh, it's very cultural, it's very, you know, like historically accurate to the, you know, Asian cultures and stuff. And I was actually really excited for both films when the trailers came out. And I say, but much to my disappointment in watching these films, it was very. I feel like part of it was like they were just trying to put it for an agenda, because around that time was like, you know, stop the Asian hate, you know, stop, you know, with COVID and everything like that. And I think that they're just trying to put an agenda. Again, totally my opinion. Everyone has their own ones, but you know, it was just really, it's definitely one of those ones that kind of falls short of like, I guess, the expectations of having representation into major films and major media and such and such like that. But yeah, no, it's, I mean, it's definitely can be. I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
All good, all good. It's difficult. I mean,
Definitely.
there's no right answer to being more inclusive in media. There's a lot of things we're trying, I think, you know, and like and by we I mean like all of us here on the show, people in Hollywood, people not in Hollywood, you know, it's there's a lot of things that are being tried, and I think over the next few years we're going to find that middle ground, you know, like I have a couple actor friends, you know, who are Asian, Hispanic, Black, who are like, yeah, you know, we used to have, you know, so many opportunities to audition for being supporting characters, but now they only want us for lead characters. So now all of our roles are even more competitive because they won't let us audition for supporting characters because they've reserved that for non-people of color now. And it's like this kind of weird backwards trend that,
Oh
you know,
yeah.
even they're facing. And it's, you know, it's one of those things where that was a reaction to, you know, how majority of TV was like 5, 10 years ago, and eventually it'll kind of find a sweet spot, I think. um and I think it's just a matter of, I guess like the biggest thing is that like people of color in the industry don't have any space to fail, it feels. And that's, I think, the most important thing people of color need to have in the industry, is to be allowed to fail, because you know, like there's so much pressure on a movie with a diverse cast, right?
Yeah.
If it fails, no one's going to want to watch it, no one's going to want to invest it. That's always the story, and to an extent that is incredibly true. And I think like once I think some of that fear and pressure gets let off of it, we're going to see some really interesting pieces of work that come out of it. Because a lot of our peers don't have that same pressure about their
Right.
work. Um, you know, and I think like the difficulty is that because films are so four quadrant, they're made for supposed to hit all the audiences, get the biggest number of people in. People are super worried about specificity ruining that, but specificity is what makes a lot of these stories really interesting. Like In the Heights is a great example of a film that everybody rallied behind, and that's directed by an Asian American director, right? And that's a film that everyone rallied behind and everyone came out to support, And I think like that's a great example of like a film that is hyper specific to an experience and a culture, but is universal as a result. And that's something that I think a lot of people are afraid to gamble on in film, and something that I think like the younger generation of up and coming filmmakers right now are really trying to get back to and really trying to push with shows you might see on like Netflix or on streamers and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, to the back to like going backwards and stuff like that. It's very, I mean, like you said, there's no space for, failure or wait, I think I'm wording that wrong.
No,
Sorry.
yeah. There's very little room for failure.
There
Yeah,
we go. Yeah, very little room
yeah.
for failure, and it's really, I mean, I think a lot of people just overthink it. The situation of like, trying to incorporate people into your films and trying to make room for them. Actually, one great example that I could think of that happened to me was I was helping create a script for this group of people, and there's a head director who was want to get these scripts from all these people. It's like a medieval fantasy style. I'm not going to talk about it because I think it's still in production or something like that. I'm not quite sure exactly, but I wrote a script and I was looking at the lore that the producer director gave to us to look at, and in it, he kind of had these like he had like all these like fantasy creatures, but I was looking at it closely and said that only these certain creatures can be played by these certain race of people in real life. And so it's like, okay, well, these guys, they have horns, whatever, this and that, and they can only be played by Black people, and this race can only be played by Asian people. And I knew he meant well, and he was a really nice, great guy. So I had to chat with him like, hey, listen, like, people might, this is coming from someone, an Asian American, who might watch this in theaters or wherever you post it online or whatever. You kind of going backwards here. I think you're kind of overthinking this. Like, I think you think, oh, well, he's like, oh, I just want people to have like, to be special in their own race, blah, blah, this and that, to have their own type of little space and stuff. Like, no, like, don't do that because these are fantasy creatures. And to other people, it might seem like, oh, you're putting us in a non-human type of category or something like that. And some people might get the wrong way. And I was like, don't overthink it, man. Like, what if someone wants to play this race, but they're not that specific real life race? Like let everyone, be who they want to be, how they want to be, and just, let it be, and he's like, okay, I know that's a good point. And so, he changed it, and I'm really glad he did. But it was really nice, kind of one of those like simple mistakes of definitely people could definitely misunderstand it. Yeah, no, but yeah. Uh, but anyways, so uh, Asian Americans, throughout the past, and at least American Hollywood and such, have been portrayed in very, stereotypical lights. And I feel like it's definitely changed a lot from more like, oh, these people are dumb to like, oh, these people are cool martial artists and stuff. And you definitely got like that era of martial art movies. Definitely got that era of stuff. I mean, what are your thoughts exactly on all these um, types of stereotypes, movies, and things that are coming out from like before in Hollywood?
Um, hmm, Good question. I think a lot of the stuff back then, like a lot of the Asian characters weren't even played by Asian people. So, there's a whole discussion around I know like a few years ago there was a whole discussion around like the idea of like how in a lot of instances Asian Americans are often invisible in terms of like how like the larger media perceives struggles of like hate crimes and whitewashing against them. And I think like that's still very prevalent. It's a lot less prevalent now, as we're starting to see more and more folks being appropriately cast. And that's, I think, just a constant ongoing struggle. I think it just, as the times change, we just have to be more vigilant about it and not walk backwards. We don't get like a Mickey Rooney situation in Breakfast at Tiffany's, because that's always the big one everyone cites. But like,
Yep.
it is kind of the big one, among many other things. And you know, it's, and this has happened before in Hollywood. You know, you look at like a film like Birth of a Nation, which we should not be studying in film schools. That film is very, that film makes some choices that,
Yeah.
you know, with in regard to actors in blackface, which is not great. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a darker history, and I'm kind of glad in the time we're in right now. Of course, there's also some ways to go. And I think one of the biggest problems, though, for people trying to make movies or try to incorporate people of other cultures and races, is that sometimes they don't fully understand that, like, people might come from a country, but the type of culture is very different within the country. For example, in China, there are many different dialects, many different languages, and not just, you got Mandarin, you got simple Chinese, you got traditional Chinese, and you got, all the other regions. I mean, Derek, Philippines alone, we have like what, 1,000
like a 1,000+
different
dialects or
languages,
something.
or
Yeah.
and slangs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I found on YouTube, I forgot the YouTuber's name, and I regret not knowing it right now, but he talked about some of the movies where it didn't make sense to have these certain type of people talking in that specific language based on the region that they're in, or what type of character they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that it's kind of like, best way I could put it is that like, it's kind of like having someone in Texas or from Texas with a Texan accent, or a cowboy in like Palm Beach, California, talking to like I don't know where, whatever. It's it's like, it's kind of like that. Every region has its own different type of culture within the culture of the country. And I think it's really hard to understand for a lot of people that that actually happens to other people. So you got Texas culture, you got California culture, you got I mean, Southern culture is a huge one, and then you got like the Northerners where they're like freezing cold and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's like us, because like we live in Nova, but in Virginia, if you go down south, the people are like completely different down there.
yeah, it's very different. And I think people also realize that that happens in every other country, everywhere, in every region and stuff. And I think it's also hard because, I mean, you look at Mulan. I was looking at in-depth analysis of Mulan, and they had a lot of mixtures of the northern and southern Chinese cultures kind of mixing and blending in together, which to a lot of people made no sense whatsoever. So you had like all these weird characteristics and aesthetics that just didn't fit either the time or didn't fit the region that it was in. And so, you got to look at that. I mean, Raya Last Dragon 2, it looked like, at least when me and my mother were watching it together, we were like kind of wondering, like, is this Filipino or is this Indonesian? And it kind of felt to us that they were just kind of mixing all these other cultures in together, because I don't think they fully understood it. But, there's also movies, not really Asian American, but, like, what do you call it? Encanto. I thought that was an incredible movie. And, Philippines shares a little bit of Spanish culture with all the, with Colombia and Mexico, and, all that through the Spanish when they, held the territory in Philippines. We share a bit of culture, and I thought it was pretty accurate, at least from my understanding of it. And I understood it, and even though I think it was mainly Colombian, but definitely fit a lot of people who weren't even from Colombia, probably in, other Hispanic countries, they're like, oh, we love that movie. It was very accurate to how we, perceive, how, like how family is in our families and stuff like that. So it's definitely one of those things where it's just really, it really hit the spot and hit the uh, jackpot of like, oh crap, like no, this is this is a movie, this is a very accurate movie, and people can definitely resonate with that. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm Puerto Rican, right? And I watched Encanto, and I was like, listen, I'm not Colombian, but any Hispanic can relate to that movie because Hispanics were known to have like not only big families, but we're known to have our families like very close to each other. Like I wasn't one that would grow up with like my grandma and my grandpa in the same roof and I would be living with my uncle or whatever. But I know that some families are like that, especially like down in Colombia and Mexico, like families are they're very close like that. And I think that's where Encanto really resonated with a lot of people, not just like Hispanics, but any like person that had to deal with like expectations from your family or had to deal with different like challenges growing up with like, oh, my siblings are so perfect compared to me and stuff, or like, oh, my mom wants me to do this or whatever. And I think those are stories that with cultures, like, yeah, you could use the culture to be like a vessel to like spread this wider message. And I think that's what a lot of people resonated with Encanto specifically. And I think I'm not like a crazy Disney guy or anything, but I really love that movie. And I don't feel like it's biased because I'm Hispanic. I just feel like this is it's like a family thing. It's not like a Hispanic thing. And I think movies like that use culture like as a vessel to tell these bigger stories, like they do it right, essentially.
Yeah. And I think that's the difficult part, right? Like, I think it's like you have to balance, especially when it's like a fantasy film, right? You have to, or a science fiction film, you have to balance what is fantastical and what is science fiction with what is grounded in reality and with what is specific to you. Like, I think like you look at Raya and the Last Dragon, which I definitely had fun with. I wish it was longer. I wish it was like 20 minutes longer.
Really?
That's my only issue with it, is that it's just it was too short. Because it's kind of like Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I know that's a really
Okay.
controversial comparison, but
Mm.
like Avatar: The Last Airbender is like a show that takes a lot of inspiration, but it pays homage, versus like a lot of other kind of like Asian centric shows at the time that were like one to one trying to rip and create like a version of their Asian culture. Like there's this old BioWare game called Jade Empire, if anyone's played it.
I
It's
haven't,
a
but I know about it.
yeah, it's a fun game, but the attempts at designing a culture specifically for the game kind of fall a bit short. And I think like the difference is kind of in sort of like the intent and the goal, right? Like the creators of Avatar: The Last Airbender, their goal is not to create a fantasy Asian culture. It was to create a story about four kids going on an adventure to save the world, right? And I think like you have to kind of look at those elements. Like Star Wars are like, Star Wars is like a samurai film, but but it's has stripped most of those elements out of it. And I think like that's you kind of have to look at it like broadly like that, but also understand that like it's so difficult to find the right balance of things. It's so painfully difficult.
Yeah.
um because I mean, like, look at how many movies just got canceled in the last week. They're already finished and they're getting pulled, right? Like, these are fully formed, complete movies. We'll never know if they were good or bad. We just know that they're never going to get released, and that happens all the time, so often. It's truly tragic.
Oh yeah,
Um,
and I think with the streaming services nowadays, it's definitely changed the game of movies and stuff. And
mhm.
people have been
Yeah,
and even celebrities have been talking about how, before it's like, okay, you have like technically two releases where it's like one in theaters and then one in DVD. And then now it's just like if you just watch it at home or watch it in the theaters. And it's kind of,
yeah,
people are really watching out for that type of, companies are really looking out for what type of movies that come out and helps make them more money, I think. And I think, besides all the cultures or anything, no matter what movie it is, whether it's Asian, Hispanic, or Black, African, whatever, uh, it's really about the story of the characters, not about just specifically putting all your focus on what culture they're from or what you want to show in it, but also what story you want to tell. One great movie is one of my favorite movies to watch is Gran Torino with Clint Eastwood. And it's a story about just like this old racist white guy living in his neighborhood, and it just happens to be that a lot of Asian immigrants are starting to move into that neighborhood, and so he's kind of dealing with before he's like this really racist old guy, but by the end of it, he's growing attached to the next door neighbors who are a whole Asian family, and it's really kind of a good somewhat of coming of age story where you have this kid who didn't grow up without a father, and he's trying to make his way into life and trying to get away from all the gangs and stuff, and this guy's kind of teaching him that way. And not a lot of it had to do with culture, really. It's there's some talks like, oh yeah, this is how we do in our culture and stuff, and it doesn't have too much to do with culture, but it blends in together and kind of like an eye opener to a guy where it's like you're opening up this whole other world to these two people who've only known this narrow world of violence or whatever and stuff. And it's definitely one of those stories where it's like it's not just about the cultures, it's about the people experiencing it together through the story, whatever is given that the screenwriters, directors give to us. And it's one of those crazy awesome films that I truly
Hmm.
It's also one of those films that had a lot of racial, like I learned a lot of racist words from that film that I didn't realize
Oh, geez.
existed. Well, it was funny too, because it was I was watching it with my grandparents and they were laughing at that. And it was interesting. I was like, you're laughing at these racists? It was like, I think it's funny because Clint Eastwood, like they think he's like Clint Eastwood, is just playing this character. These are racial words, but they're idiots who are saying them, and it's really and it really opened my eye too of that one where it really depends on the context of what's being said, and like I've definitely like was weirded out by like why my grandparents laughing at these racist jokes on Asians. But they said just don't let it get to you. If you're offended or something, just laugh at whatever. And it was really really weird but humbling experience of seeing my grandparents laugh. They laughed like hard, like really hard, like they were choking on food hard. That was how much they laughed. But yeah, no. Do you have a timer, Hector?
Nothing has popped up. So I think we can keep going.
All right, let's just keep going.
Yeah, I mean, nothing. If it pops up, we know when to close, but it hasn't popped up for me, so no. I don't know what's different today, but
I guess we'll just keep going until it stops. So anyways, Derek,
Mhm.
being in the film industry, being in the media, do you have any like advice you'd like to give to us, students, something in the field, or you just,
Yeah. So I think there's a few ways to look at the industry, right? There's of course the two big there's like the three big kingdoms of the industry, LA, New York, Atlanta. And like if you go to any of those places, you're most likely going to find work if you want to freelance. But to freelance, like I'd mentioned earlier, you need to be good at one part of the filmmaking process, whether that be, running camera or running sound or editing or VFX. Being good at one particular element of filmmaking is going to be a great way to get a foot in the door to get work. Because the hardest part about being in film, ultimately, just like any other career, is paying your bills and not being stressed out by that. And so if you can find a way to do that through staying in film, that's always like a easier way to stay a part of the industry, so you can eventually start to build that network and then eventually make like whatever you want to make, whether that's a movie or a music video or just some other cool experiment. And I think, like it's gonna take a while. Like, it took me 4 years from graduating to finally make a film that played in some festivals. And when I graduated film school, I wasn't like some kids. I didn't have a thesis. I didn't have a lot of money post grad. I didn't have a lot of time to kind of relax. I kind of had to immediately try and find a job. And so for me, like freelancing, like I had mentioned, didn't really make sense. So getting like a full-time job in the industry was the next best thing. And I think that's the other thing, right? It's like, don't be afraid to take that full-time job. I know we live in an era where everyone's saying like, quit your job, be an influencer, travel the world, photograph blue oceans. Um, but there is, I think, value in not taking that route so immediately. I think the nicest part about like being in a film school environment like you all are is that you all are going to be in, these are the people you're going to work with in the future. And I think like remembering like how you all can help each other. Because like sometimes like at least when I was in the early days of freelancing, there'd be instances where like someone I knew at film school or had worked with would get me on a gig, for like a day, and that was like helpful. That was like super nice of them to like vouch for me. And I think like it's like those kinds of relationships that like you start building now. And beyond that, a lot of filmmaking is just perseverance. It is working really hard for a really long time. So the advice I would give is also just make sure that like you're healthy enough to enjoy it. Like take care of yourself. Like the hustle, believe it or not, can wait, because you're going to be hustling for a really long time. And if you work so hard that by the time you get to that finish line, that's the end of the line for you, like you want to quit film, or like you've run your body ragged, like lifting things, like lifting 200 pounds worth of tripods without using your legs. um that stuff's gonna affect whether or not you can be in film or not. And I think like the best part about being in film is of course making film with your friends and staying safe, right? Nobody wants an onset injury. That's like one of the worst things that can happen in film. And I think
Yeah.
we don't talk about it enough, how much we should be prioritizing health and safety in film. And so, take care of yourself, focus on one element of the process to become really good at. So then that way you can find work, however, by whatever means, whether that's freelancing or like a job at like an agency or being an assistant or
An internship.
um an internship. Yeah. Sometimes they're paid out here, which is nice. But like there's also like other jobs too. Like there's not just, I feel like sometimes we only talk about like assistant jobs or like receptionist jobs out here. There's also like post-production assistant jobs or like production assistant jobs that are more like office PAs. And so there's like lots of different ways to like get your foot in the door. It just kind of depends on where you end up. And like a lot of people talk about how difficult it is to switch from one ladder to another ladder. Like if you're on the film track and you want to be in the TV track, it's too late because you're already on the film track. A lot of people will say that. It's really not that true. What matters more is, are you good at what you do, and can what you do translate to the other track? Can what you do in film translate to what you do in TV? Can what you do in TV translate to what you do in digital media? And if you can figure out that, it's a lot easier to hop between job to job, space to space, and bring your connections with you or find new connections. So that would be my advice. And also just to, stick with it. They say to make it in LA, you have to live here 18 months. And then you'll be here like several decades. So, um,
18 months
like
is a long time.
it is a surprisingly long time and a surprisingly short time. And I will say, like a lot of folks that didn't like LA left before their 18 months and went to other places like New York or Atlanta and then found success there. So, it's like you don't just have to move to one of these three places. Of course, there's more opportunities to be physically present in these spaces, but nowadays there's a lot of filmmaking everywhere. So that's the other route. Like if it's cheaper to stay where you are at, do that. Find an in through film wherever you're at, because film can be expensive, and the last thing you want to do is like max out a credit card to survive so you can be somewhere in LA or something, because that's just not fun to be doing. But yeah, so get good at one part of the film craft, and that way you can find a job easy peasy and not have to worry about work. And then stick to it and take care of yourself. Stay healthy. That'd be my advice.
Awesome.
Oh yeah,
dude.
and keep in touch with your friends.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for everything, man. It was really great advice. Really nice talking to you. I
Yeah.
do want to come out to LA and visit everyone there. So if you ever want to get a bite to eat over there when I'm over there, just I'll let
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. And same goes for everyone else that's here. If you're ever in LA, hit me up. Happy to talk more about film. Yeah, it's what I do every day.
You gave us a lot of insight today with everything. So I really appreciate it that you took time off your schedule and be here with us today.
Yeah, no worries. I love talking to people about filmmaking and like getting into the industry because it's I don't know, it's like the one thing in film school they don't teach you. So
Oh yeah, yeah. I think
Yeah.
I remember a few weeks we were talking while I was on the job too, in training, and yeah, Sarah was just like, stop, we gotta work and stuff. So.
yeah.
But yeah, no, thank you so much for donating your time. We're gonna let you go here now. I think time's up, although I don't see your timer.
Sounds good.
Yeah, no, thank you for everything.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you,
All
Derek.
right. Bye.
Bye. All right. And if you want to stop recording right now.